Hey everybody, welcome to the Dreamer's Edge podcast. I am sitting with...
Nicholas, I write video game reviews for thedreamersedge.com.
Francois, librarian, part-time writer.
Chris, subtitle editor and sometimes writer for The Dreamer's Edge.
And I am Dimitri, webmaster of the Dreamer's Edge.com and movie critic, and we are doing part 2 of the best of the 60s, in which Frank, Nick, and I will list our top 3 movies of the 60s. Let's get started right away. Frank, why don't you start with your top 3 picks?
Okay, I'm going to pick Planet of the Apes as number 3.
Excellent. It was in my runner-ups, certainly.
I think Planet of the Apes is a very odd movie. It really is. It's one of those movies that's unlike a lot of what was being done at the time. It's based on a, bad French novel. And it's got Charlton Heston, who basically... kind of suffers a lot of abuse throughout this movie. It's a really very dark movie.
Filmed in that weird, bright 60s way.
That's,
that sense.
You know what I mean?
But
I think they went over the top. I mean, there's a shot of Charlton Heston at one point being chased by the apes. And, the camera sort of goes right under his legs and he's being, all of a sudden shot from upside down as he's running away. It's really, I saw it at the perfect age. I think I saw it when I was 12 or 13. Which meant 2 things. I was engrossed by the story, and I didn't see it coming. I guess, a lot of people remember that ending, and a lot of people figure that ending is cliche, but it's only cliche because everybody's seen it, as opposed to maybe at the time when you went to the movie theater and people walked away. It's like, oh my God. It's a quintessential ending. Like, really...
It's a nice little twist, for sure. You know what I mean? Because the story itself doesn't need that. And when that happens, you're like, oh... that changes a little bit what I saw. You know what I mean? Like, so it makes it interesting.
But it also has, this sense of like Charlton Heston really sells the scene.
That's it. I think that's what makes it work. Even because I saw it, I already knew, but the way he plays it makes it work, even though you already knew it.
And it's the way it's shot is incredible. But there are other, take your dirty hands off me, you damn dirty ape, or there are these moments where throughout, in the early part of the movie, you're like, okay, you want this guy to talk, you want this guy to convince people, and then he does it in such a dramatic way. The makeup work was interesting. It's a science fiction movie.
What year was that?
Like 68.
One of the things I wanted to touch on, you mentioned that it's based on a terrible French novel, and you're not kidding. That thing, because I was interested in reading it just because I liked the movie, and I read it. It's for you young listeners who maybe not have read this, it's the Tim Burton remake from the 1990s. It's much closer to the source material to give you an idea of how bad it is.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Charlton Heston being really good at it, and what I like about it is that he plays a jerk. This is an interesting movie where your protagonist, the more you know about him, the more you go, wow, you're an asshole. I am not supposed to like you. And I thought that was really interesting.
Well, he plays that cocky astronaut, jet fighter, kind of just like jackass. You know what I mean? And he does it really well.
Yeah.
Oddly enough.
It makes it that there's sort of kind of 2 reversals going in the movie. Like, there's the final scene. But there's also the fact that it's like, wait, no, our hero's not right here. He's kind of a real bastard. And
yeah, we're sympathizing with him because he's the minority.
Yeah.
But just because he's a minority doesn't mean he's in the right.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it interesting. It did spawn a couple sequels, you know what I mean? So obviously there was something there.
5.
Yeah, 5 of them.
Right? Yeah.
And they get progressively darker.
Well, it's like the third one, the world explodes, right? Like,
second.
It was the second. Already in the second one, it's like, what? That was the surprise for me. So it's like, I'm like,
and then,
but
there's
I know
a sequel to that.
I know there's 3 more.
And on that note, my second pick. I have to say, I think I'll call it the best war movie ever made, which is a bold statement, certainly, and it's The Great Escape.
Oh, okay.
With James Gardner, Steve McQueen, of course, and Richard Attenborough. It's really just an all-around interesting premise, to be honest. It starts out very humoristic, very funny, oddly enough. And it really has something you don't necessarily see a lot in war movies. I mean, it takes place in a war context, but it's not a bunch of soldiers, trying to secure an objective or trying to take a hill. It's about a bunch of guys who are in a prison camp and have to get out and use their wits and their intelligence and just any number of tricks to get out, and is kind of powerful too. I mean, yeah.
What I liked about it is that it does play up that microcosm of like the different countries coexisting closely together. You know, like allies, and also like
Of course, the Americans. This being an American movie, they have the kind of importance. I mean, that.
For sure.
Of course, James Gardner has to.
But the thing is, there are rules to warfares. You know what I mean? Like, and it's those rules that we don't think about when, you know what I mean? Like, and maybe they don't really exist. You know what I mean? But it's just like, like we like to think that there are rules, and it's just like in a normal war movie where it's just like people like raiding bunkers. You know what I mean? Like you don't see those played out, but you see them played out under the false civility of a POW camp, and it was such a brilliant kind of like where you see this like veil of civility where it's just like, no, we're just like yesterday, if you give me a gun, like I would be killing you. I could be your friend now, and I hate you, but
And there's a measure of, like, of course, you've got the Luftwaffe who wants to maintain order in the camp versus the SS, which is a lot more brutal. So you've got this sense of, like, a German officer who's kind of trying to keep control, but understanding at the same time that, the others are going to try to break out. I mean, the duty of every officer is to escape. But, it's got an ensemble cast, and it really takes you through the entire plot from start to finish. Steve McQueen riding his motorcycle towards the end, arguably the coolest scene filmed ever. I mean, it's just awesome. And it does have that ending of like, it's very bittersweet. I mean, there's an escape, but I mean, a lot of these guys get captured. And
it's not really a spoiler if it's called The Great Escape.
Yeah. And on that note, my final pick, I will claim that this is the greatest movie ever made.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
Boom, I'm throwing down.
Okay. And I'm a bit confused because Howard the Duck was made in the 80s. So, yeah.
Oh, boy.
So, wait.
So...
2001.
Yeah,
Space Odyssey.
2001 Space Odyssey?
Mary Poppins.
Well, two of you are right. Yes, 2001. Kubrick sat down with Arthur C. Clarke. He wanted to make a good science fiction movie, and he sat down and they hammered out a plot and a script in hotel rooms, and that's what they came up with. And I have to say, I mean, it's in terms of concept, it doesn't get higher than that. I think it's a movie that is so unlike so many movies. You have to sit down, you have to think about it. There's a lot of silence. The use of silence, the use of music, the use of image. It's so far beyond anything that had come before. I think. I think the attention to detail, Kubrick's desire to portray space exploration, the future, space travel in a way that was as realistic as he could understand it and see it at the time. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting. In science fiction movies, whenever there's an alien presence, it's one that, in 99.9% of movies, is something that can be understood. And I think that the portrayal of the alien intelligence, whatever you want to call it, in 2001 is something that goes beyond that. And I think that that's, if we're to encounter something, it's probably going to be something like that. And that in itself is something that makes you think. If you read the book, if you read the book that Arthur C. Clarke published...
Can I just say I hate that book? Sorry, go on.
Well, I mean, it gives you a lot of answers that you don't necessarily get, or...
That's why I hate the book.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. Like, the book sort of gives you the answers, and Kubrick took that and said, I'm going to set it aside, and I'm just going to let the audience think. And it's, some of them take away different things.
The movie's not based on the book, though. It's worth mentioning. They were written at the same time.
Exactly.
They were done at the same time.
Well, I think was what they they were working simultaneously, but I think that Kubrick probably looked at the book that Clarke was working on, and he said, you know what, I'm not going to include those parts in that. And he made that decision. I think really, it's what makes that movie what it is, and it's really. Cara Duello, who plays Dave, was saying, like he said, people have been asking me for years what it means, and I just tell them that 2001 is one giant IQ test.
And a lot of has been said about the ending being undecipherable, and I don't agree. I mean, no, you don't understand the physics of it. It's not a narrative logic that is traditional by any sense, but you do understand what the character goes through and how it concludes the story that started with the apes at the beginning.
Yeah,
like
no,
that part is clear, and it's the part that matters, you know. And I kind of like the idea of, like you said, like sort of adopting an alien language when they actually do meet the alien, you know.
Absolutely. Like, I hate to say it, like a lot of movies obviously are grounded in human experience because we're humans and we're making movies and the movies are about humans. But, you know, I think this is the closest thing to, okay, I mean, here we have aliens, genuine actual aliens, and we're not going to understand necessarily what they're about. And it delivers that, which is really thinking outside the box, I guess, in a sense.
It's very kind of unforgiving in a way. Like, it forces the audience to kind of like really learn how to watch the movie, you know. And there's a lot of silence, and it's just slow movement in space.
It's true, you know. The movie pulls no punches in terms of like you have to follow along, like you said. But what I like about it though is that it's quite calculated in the way it does that. Like, it hits you hard by going like, here's a bunch of apes, enjoy, you know, no dialogue, apes, go.
Yeah.
And like, if you survive that, then you're treated to some space ballet and some machines being really cool. You're like, survive that. But then when you get past that, and by the time that you're probably tired of being challenged that way, it gives you a traditional thriller. And a really good one at that. Like, Hal is possibly one of the most memorable villains in cinema.
Absolutely. Like, and the concept, again, of like a computer that actually challenges human intelligence. That's another piece that people in this day and age, we take it for granted, but we forget that then at that time it was a very novel idea. You know, the notion of a computer defeating a human being at chess. And yeah, it is a pretty tense situation. And, you know, so I read your lips, like that chill you get. Oh man, and it's and yet the heartbreaking scene when like he basically goes and he starts deactivating the computer. It's just absolutely memorable, like shocking almost. Like, it's just there's so many that movie works on so many levels. It's unbelievable.
Oh yeah, no, it's because it's. For those who haven't seen it, it's essentially a cat and mouse chase, but played on an entirely intellectual level.
Yeah.
It's just two people trying to outsmart each other, essentially, and being really good at it. Yeah. And the reversal, like you said at the end, it's where the villain, who is not human, reveals a certain side of it that's so human. And it's, like you said, heartbreaking. It's just, it's that section of the movie is perfect.
Yeah. When that one scene, you see something that to me is like so different, and we just haven't really imagined much on that level yet, and yet it came out in '68. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great pick, I think.
Yeah.
All right, Nick, your pick for number 3.
I have watched a few movies from the 60s. A lot of them mostly because of my love of James Bond, which is a series I love a lot. And 2 great movies there, so I'm going to do 2 picks, my number 3 and number 2 at the same time. Okay. Dr. No and Goldfingers are probably the best of the franchise.
Goldfinger, I really like. I would have to say probably the quintessential Bond line.
Yeah.
You know, I expect you to die, which is not uttered by James Bond.
Yeah, it's the bad guy. You really see James Bond in trouble, and he has to kind of, bluff as well the situation by saying, I know your plan, and, I told it to my superiors, so, you have to spare me or else, everything. So, really bluffing, and Goldfinger doesn't have a choice. Fine, okay, I'll spare you for now. And he exposed a great plan, which is completely not what he wants to do at all. He's going for something completely different in the end, and it's great.
That is very true.
Yeah.
That is very true. I will say that it has probably the coolest Bond girl name ever.
The one from the novel, his nemesis from the novel,
and in the book, well, Pussy Galore.
Yeah.
A novel
from the novels and the book.
Yeah.
Both. She's in several.
The novelization of the book.
Would you prefer Goldfinger over Dr. No?
Yeah.
Or Dr. No over
I prefer Goldfinger. Dr. No has a cool story, a lot of very good action. It's about some madman trying to screw up NASA and the Mercury program.
No, that's You Only Live Twice.
Really?
That is You Only Live Twice. Dr. No is about the Dr. No, the doctor with the mechanical hand.
Yeah, and his plan is with Mercury. I looked it up earlier to be
Mercury?
100% sure. Yeah.
Get the hell out. Okay.
You got 00 served.
Attends a minute. What's okay? But what? Okay, so what's You Only Live Twice?
It probably has to do with space too, honestly.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah, because there are a lot of them.
Crap, I gotta watch those again.
But yeah, those movies were also at the point where Sean Connery was really in the role. He wasn't like kind of like winging it. It's like he didn't want to do it anymore. He was like, I have to do this one again. And
It's only putting it in near the end there.
Yeah, completely. But yeah, the first one he was really good as James Bond.
But from the beginning, the James Bond movies really did have that perfect mix of like knowing camp with with clever little action elements. You know what I mean? Like, and it's very like super science, like gadgets, and you know what I mean. Like they had a mix. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a mix that they're still going back to today.
Yeah.
As much as they're trying to make it real world, and in the 60s it worked so well. It was like very good choices.
Yeah, no, and what I like about Sean Connery's Bond more than any other, certainly more than Roger Moore,
chest hair,
very good. Chest. Well, actually, Pierce Brosnan has a lot of chest hair as well. So.
Yeah, but it's CGI'd.
But is that he had, he had those stupid one-liners, and they were stupid, but he managed to play it in such a way that you got that he knew it was stupid without him being stupid. And it's sort of a very delicate balance. Roger Moore, I don't think ever struck that. He just went like, we're all having fun.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Connery version, it's really like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, that's dumb. But I'm just saying it anyway.
But as a punchline, when you kill a guy, there's that dark eye. Well, you certainly got the point. Like you're right about that. That is very Sean Connery-ish.
And my number one is a musical.
Ooh!
West Side Story.
No, A Hard Day's Night.
Ah!
Kind of a musical, I guess.
It is a musical.
But basically, you had it's the Beatles. Basically.
Were you surprised by the ending?
Not really. But before then, the big music side that tried to make movies was Elvis, and his movies were pretty much horrible because it was Elvis being a biker or working in a garage, or Elvis doing other stuff. He was
in prison.
Or in prison, yes. And it was basically being everybody but Elvis. And the Beatles said, "Yeah, we'll do a movie, but we don't want something to do crap like that." And that was almost their word there. So they basically came up with the idea of having just an exaggerated day in the life of the Beatles, and that's what the movie is, and it's perfect because the Beatles knew how to act like themselves, And the way the music is filmed in the movie is pretty much what started the music video. You have them playing a song, and it cuts to action scenes and going back to them with the instruments, and it's very, it's insane to see. Wow, and you can see this is where the music video came from.
I've seen two Beatles movies, Help and Hard Day's Night. By far, Hard Day's Night is like is something I can handle. Like Help, I wanted to sort of almost want to. I wanted to commit various bodily harm gestures towards myself.
They made the mistake of not having the Beatles be themselves and just be action stars.
They're performers, but they're not actors.
Yeah,
they're performers. There's a difference,
Let's be honest. The movie is worth your time just for the music. The Beatles is fantastic music, and it's fantastic music then, and it's fantastic music now. It hasn't aged. It hasn't been moved in terms of its greatness.
Yeah.
And there you have it, folks.
Exactly.
The 60s, brought to you by the Beatles.
Pretty much. All right, so Dimitri, what are your choices?
My choices are, like I said, pretty much classics, and you took two of them off my list. So. All right, so my number 3 pick for best movie of the 60s, I had to go with a Hitchcock movie. I didn't like The Bird, so I imagine you can all guess which one it is.
Psycho.
Yeah, it's Psycho. I picked it less because I like it and more because it's so influential. It created the horror thriller and led to the slasher further down the line, minus the exploitation. And also, created a plight on poor schizophrenic people for 50 years to come who will continue to be misdiagnosed and misunderstood by people. Thank you, Hitchcock.
It certainly has given pause to countless women throughout the decades, as far as taking a shower alone is concerned.
So you're suggesting they decided they wanted to take showers with people after seeing that?
Well, I'm not going to say it's
For Frank
self-serving. The sounds for the actual stabs was him taking a knife to a melon with a microphone right next to it. That's how he achieved that sound. Like, but as such an interest, like, I mean, you know, some might say the quintessential scene filmed ever. Like, just a composition, you can teach a course, like, seriously, on that scene alone.
Yeah, they have, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
The vocabulary of it is fascinating, and the idea of, you know, he has a villain who's a genuine villain and somewhat of a menace, thank you, that is just so sympathetic even after you realize that it's a villain. You know,
Anthony
talk about a
Perkins is
tragic
like-
figure.
he's like-
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And of course, early on, I mean, you know, of course, you've got a twist in the movie. Early on, you've got this guy. You're not quite sure where he's at. Like, there's just like, I don't know. It's a very interesting movie. In the early parts, of like when he disposes of the body and puts the car like rolling into the lake, you're like, what's going on here? Like, really, what's going on? And, you know, starting off with a plot of a bank heist essentially, and then turning in a complete, like, halfway through the movie, this becomes something else entirely.
People get angry at these days. If you go in a movie expecting, like, you know, an action thing, and all of a sudden it turns into something different, people will just walk out being angry.
Well, yeah, somebody sued the movie Drive because it turned out to be more cerebral than she expected.
Wow.
It's like, what? It's a character piece instead of an action movie? I'm suing. Like, that's actually what happened.
The trailers were misleading, so you stole my money.
Yeah,
2 words, Hudson Hawk.
But back to Psycho, it's also the anatomy of the scene. Like, there's one scene that will always stay with me forever. And I saw the movie countless times, and I know what it is, and, you know, I know all the twists and whatnot. And
I think I know which scene you're talking about. It's the detective? The stairs?
Yeah, the stairs.
Yeah.
And it's all in the way it's shot. The angle chosen for it, where suddenly this old woman runs towards it and stabs him. It's so sudden, it's so filmed in a disturbing way, and I know it's coming, and every time it comes, it gives me nightmares afterwards. It's
and the
crazy.
whole shot of him, like, sort of reeling back, and anyways, another very crucial scene, amazing scene.
My number 2 pick, Mary Poppins, 1964. I love that movie. I think it's a great children's movie. I really do.
Does she end up sleeping with Dick Van Dyke at the end?
I always thought she did, even as a kid.
Okay.
But
because they definitely felt some tension there.
And he had that name.
I
I liked that movie when I was a kid, for sure. You know what I mean? Like, just even watching it years later, and just like that, the melding of that fantasy world, which was basically, it does go back a little bit to the Wizard of Oz in a way, where it's just like you go from black and white to color. You know what I mean? Like, and it's got that like element of like the strange or the otherworldly, and the Dick Van Dyke character that kind of like invites these people into this otherworldly world, which is cartoon.
The precursor to Cool World.
Or, you know, Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
No, I'm pretty sure Cool World is more remembered.
But the way they kind of like meld those two things together was great at the time, you know.
And then some of the metaphors are interesting too on a kid level. Like, you know, when they start laughing, they start floating in the air because that's how you feel when you get that sort of incessant laughter feeling. And the idea that, you know, as a kid especially, like, you have to learn to calm down. You can't be like that all the time. It's like, all these ideas are so fascinating.
There's a whole scene where they're just cleaning up. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's interesting. You know, like it's a good story.
All right, my number 1 pick was actually my number 3 pick, and then the 2 picks that it got taken by other people. So it got bumped all the way to the number 1, and that would be
Double Up. Stephen King, 60. No.
Nope. It's a 1968 film, and I mentioned the sequel in the 70s one. It's Night of the Living Dead.
I thought maybe you'd go for
The one that started it all.
Yeah, pretty much. The one who started exploitation cinema, really, and midnight screening.
And zombies.
And zombies, of course. I didn't want to go with horror again, but that's the ones I have left. And again, I'm choosing it mostly because of its uncanny influence. you didn't have that much gore in cinema until that movie came out, you know? And the thing about it is it's actually smart. It's an interesting political comment about how we were treating another race after the Vietnam War, and it's compelling. And I know that the director George Romero said, I was like, oh no, we wrote the role for a white guy and we just cast a black guy and that's coincidence. But the fact is you did cast a black guy. And the fact is it does change the movie completely.
Yeah, incredibly groundbreaking for so many reasons. Particularly like today. I mean, you know, some movies have a long range influence and they sort of seep into the consciousness. But today, I mean, you know, you've got the CDC preparing a zombie apocalypse contingency program to get people interested in, you know, being safe. You have the CDC issuing, you know, warnings that there's not a zombie apocalypse because, you know, there's been reported instances of cannibalism in the news.
Yeah.
And you're like, we've really reached a point now where, unlike a lot of the classic horror figures like, you know, Frankenstein monster, the Wolfman, or, you know, vampires, the zombie for some reason has a kind of reality, despite the fact that it's completely over the top as it might. It has a kind of reality. It's really seeped into our consciousness where we actually almost kind of believe that it's possible.
What's also interesting is a lot of the movies about the threat inside. It's about, you know, most of the conflict and most of the people who die comes from this group of people who just refuse to take the authority of a black man, and what it comes down to. And it's absolutely fascinating, like the whole idea that like this level of intolerance and distrust and whatnot, how, you know, a fairly well-organized plan, a good idea, a situation that's being depicted as easy to survive because when it comes daylight, you know, everything, you see that a lot of people have survived just fine, you know. It's just turned asunder just because, you know, people won't respect the authority of a black man for Republicans. And I find that fascinating. It's a comment that's still oddly relevant today.
Well, I think in a larger context, in today is where I find it. You know, I mean, I actually find zombie movies typically very frustrating to watch. The slasher movies take the same approach sometimes, with the characters behaving incredibly stupidly, and you ending up screaming at the television, going, "No, don't go downstairs with the flashlight! Don't, you idiot!" But you have that sense of like, okay, well, breakdown of society, the zombies are there and they're doing what they're doing, but you've got the mob mentality to a certain extent, the panic, but also the whole of like, to which extent do you collaborate or refuse to collaborate, and how stupid mistakes end up being so crucially, you know, full of consequences. It's interesting, you know, because you've got that situation where the people in which are placed, it's very, from a psychological standpoint, you know, it's not just them, it's also us.
Mm.
Well, the creep factor of the zombie is very similar for me to something like the birds. You know what I mean? Where it's just like you put anything and you multiply it, it becomes scary. Mm. But one slow shuffling zombie on its own is kind of creepy, but, you know, they're kind of easy to kill. Mm. But if you've suddenly got 300 of them kind of like, you know, coming at you from like all these different places, like suddenly it kind of like, it becomes a metaphor for something.
Right.
You know, God help you if they start dancing. And on that note, if you want to share with us your best movies of the 60s, you can write us at mail@thedreamersedge.com or post a comment at thedreamersedge.com. Just click on the episode name. We're also on Facebook, we're also on Twitter, we're also on iTunes. Until next time.